This is the story of Brainy the RPG cat, and in many ways it's a very typical story. One day an old man found a stray kitten in a library, and he chose to keep it as a mascot, and to keep him in gentle company. But this was no ordinary old man, for he was Bosch, the high elf headmaster of the Library of Dinah, a very not ordinary library dedicated to the goddess of all living knowledge. And before long, Bosch would learn that this was also no ordinary cat.
Hello.
Learning that the cat was intelligent, the wizard took it upon himself to teach him to read and write, and learn history and the ways of magic. He was quite taken with the lessons he got from games using cards and dice. And soon the cat grew into an adult, a scholar, a full-fledged wizard in his own right, and once and forever one of the most dedicated librarians in Denier. The wizard bestowed upon him a name in the tradition of all cat people. He who astounds with his immediately brilliant ideas. But the library wizards have taken to calling him Brainy the RPG cat. And let me tell you, it hasn't been a bed of roses.
Brainy the cat. Brainy the RPG cat. It's a kitty cat.
Hello, cats and kittens, felines and felidae, humans and variant humans, and every race, class, and subclass. Welcome to another edition of Brainy the RPG Cat. Tonight we are reading another book from the 5e Kickstarter that was recently published on Humble Bundle. I'm just starting to forget all the names of all of these websites all of a sudden. But, yeah, we're going to be reading Blight, Richard Prett's Cooked City, and, yeah, we're going to get right into that, but the first thing that I would like to do is, take a moment to talk to you about Well of the Worlds. So, Well of the Worlds is an upcoming Kickstarter. It is a Kickstarter that comes to us from Mobius Worlds Publishing and... well, excuse me, because, I actually did want to take a couple of these concepts. Hang on, Devin says, "Hi, Brady. Sorry for my absence for the well stream. I misunderstood. I hadn't realized you were co-streaming it. And, I had Raid and I really got caught up in it. Well, at any rate, I really just kind of wanted people to be directed to the actual... Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Master of Rem. And so, I believe that you did it the correct way. So, that's where you went. You went to their Twitch, and I saw you in the chat room.
And we all watched that and we had a good time. So happy ending had by all. So thank you very much for doing that, by the way. I do want to try to shed a lot of attention on Well of the Worlds, and that's a nice segue into what I was trying to say before I got thrown off by the fact that my screen wasn't set up correctly. So, anyways, Well of the Worlds, Mobius Worlds Publishing, written by Michael Serbrook and published by Rem Alters Productions and Mobius Worlds Publishing. Welcome to the Well where the Bermuda Triangle ends. Well the Worlds is a campaign setting for the Prowlers and Paragons tabletop RPG meant to evoke the feel of Japanese isekai and Western portal fantasy tales. As with many classic examples of the genre, much of a player's and their characters' experiences during a session will come from exploring the Well. As the campaign progresses, they'll learn more about the Well's peculiar climate, discover strange ruins, wonder at the unusual sky, and meet numerous peoples who are definitely not from Earth. And as is the case with many of those stories, the characters slowly discover they have strange and unusual patterns in this new world. As the setting subtitle says, this is where the Bermuda Triangle ends. A module for Prowlers and Paragons Ultimate Edition. Prowlers and Paragons Ultimate Edition is everything you need to create unique superheroes and play exciting stories right out of comic books and movies. There are countless powers and power options, extensive rules for gear, vehicles, and even headquarters, and a massive assortment of animals and non-player characters, and extensive guidance to help game masters run the most engaging superhero games possible. Prowlers and Paragons Ultimate Edition is super flexible with easy, intuitive game mechanics, but still contains enough crunch to keep every character from feeling the same. Character creation is fast, fun, and allows just about any concept that you can come up with. Yeah, that was fun. That was a fun stream that we had watched together this last Sunday. And so I just decided to preempt Saturday stream so that, I would get the opportunity to watch that. And so I had to postpone tonight's stream for tonight. But, we're here tonight. And once I'm actually done talking about Well of the Worlds one more time, then we will get right to tonight's book. So, what is the Well? Imagine a world where the weather is a perfect day in and day out, where it seems to be perpetually midsummer. No rainy season or periods of drought to interrupt the endless pleasant days, where the sun always rises at the same time and place and sets 14 hours later, where crops can be grown year-round, meaning everyone has enough to eat without the lean periods that plague less fortunate worlds. While there are multiple humanoid peoples dwelling for the most part in harmony, can you imagine such a world? Good, then welcome to Well of the Worlds. Designed as a standalone pocket universe, the Well was originally connected to assorted alternate dimensions and worlds throughout the multiverse. It is from these worlds the Peak's intended visitors originally came. Currently, the Well is still connected to a multitude of other universes, but the connections are unstable and tend to drift and or open erratically. In addition, the Well, by its very nature, is prone to collect errant hyperspace jaunts, teleportation errors, lost dimensional portals, and the like. The Well of the World sits at the bottom of the multiverse, slowly collecting all the interdimensional detritus that drifts down through the verse, eventually fetching up within the Well itself. Well of the Worlds, managed by Rem Alters Productions, written by Michael Serbrook, and published by Mobius Worlds Publishing. Be sure to go to tinyurl.com/welloftheworlds in order to sign your name up onto the mailing list. You'll be prepared for when the Well of the Worlds Kickstarter officially launches on April the 4th. Alrighty, folks. So, all of that aside, let's go ahead and let's look at tonight's book. This is The Lost Lands, the Blight, Richard Prett's Crooked City, GM Guide, 5th edition, published by Frog God Games. Author Richard Prett, additional design by Pete Pollard, Alistair Rigg, Jeffrey Swank, and Greg A. Vaughn. Lead developer Greg A. Vaughn. Developers Matthew J. Finch, Skeeter Green, David Landry, John Ling, Alistair Rigg, and Jeffrey Swank. Producer Bill Webb. Editor Skeeter Green. Jeff Harkness, Jeffrey Swank, and Crystal Rebb. Layout and graphic design by Charles Wright. 5th edition adaptation by Matt Finch, Edwin Nagy, Patrick N. Pilgrim, Michael G. Potter, and Anthony Pryor. Front cover art by Artem Shukalev. Interior art by Colin Chan, Mike Cheney, Carol S. Celsius, Steve Ellis, Peter Fairfax, Felipe Gama, R.P. Gauchius, Brian LeBlanc, Eric Lofgren, Olas Magnus, Chris McFadden, Terry Pavlet, Richard Prett, Nate Pride, Richard Thomas, Giovanni Andretta Vassor, Tyler Walpole, and Richard Yardley and Peter Short. I think I pronounced all of those correctly. Photography by Richard Prett, and cartography by Robert Altbauer. Let me see. Heads up, before you get too into it, I'm having the same audio issues as usual. It's just far too quiet, and I gotta turn the headset way up to here. As I've been having this issue just slightly since I began to, start to use the codec, but to its credit, the codec is actually working in order to make my voice a lot clearer, so I don't know, that's the trade-off. I could keep it or I could delete it and I could go back to having more of a gain that comes from the actual microphone, but then it would also mean that I would have to I'd have to scale back the sound quality. So I don't know. It's the eternal battle over on this side of the screen, but it's hard to describe the whole issue because it's almost like all of the levels across the board are just too low. Well, on your side, my levels are normal. I think maybe there might be something you need to do to check on your side, like actually maybe adjust the master volume on your side of the computer and then just kind of lower it, using something on the outside like a volume control. It's just so low. Yeah. For example, I have another stream in the background at 5% volume, and it's almost as loud as you. I don't know. Think I have done all of that I could. I have reached my event horizon when it comes to this. Maybe if I just change the type of microphone input, maybe that would help a little bit. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so just a slight change in how the microphone was receiving did that this time. So, anyways, I'll get back to the book. Special thanks I'm indebted to the Paizo community for their endless encouragement, feedback, and suggestions over many years. Their ideas, enthusiasm, and involvement is more than just useful, it is inspirational. I'm particularly grateful to James Jacobs for adding his twisted spices to many of my adventures, and to Eric Mona for laughing at the Devil Box and being a fine fellow. To Wes, James, Jason, Rob, and Wolfgang Bauer for being such a splendid man to work for. Setting dedicated to Jeff 2, a damn fine thief whose spirit still graces our gaming table and whose favorite character still walks these streets. In order to know virtue, we must first acquaint ourselves with vice. Quotations, except as noted otherwise, are from the Marquis as the Sod, 1740-1814. I basically just changed the mode on my microphone. But yeah, as long as it's working, let us speak of it no more. Okay, so this is, just a GM's guide for a setting. So it's the great majority of this is going to be read, and we're not going to have a situation like we did with some of the previous books where we have to avoid reading direct player character instructions. But so we should be able to get through a significant amount of this. I think this one is also a lot longer. I think this one sits at about 202 pages. So we might have to do a second part of this. Okay, so first interior cover image, just appears to be of a mountaintop with a very shaky looking straw house built onto the side of it. All right, GM guide for the players. Excuse me. Just a bit of a bubble right there. A stitched thing shambles through the night, the smog of the canker caressing it. Hooded and covered, this thing's head is too large for its body, and it has to lean frequently against the dirt-smeared brick embankments of Sister Lynn, and stuck in air through broken lips. A stench like rotting vegetables and sugar surrounds it. People move by it in the smog quietly and nervously going about their business. Occasionally, a cockroach crunches under their feet. Some travelers are rich enough to have link bays, and a ghastly yellow pallor surrounds the conspirators as they flit like a will-o-wisp through the poison air of the street. The silence is suddenly stabbed by the sound of a carriage clattering along the cobbles. A child's nightmare pulls the carriage, yet no one seems to notice. It gulps the air as it lurches by. a slick black thing that hobbles spastically yet with great purpose. Unseen within, a naga pulls at a hookah, her arcane limbs fidgeting nervous. She is reading an ancient cannibalistic work that details a rage-fair elemental, a hateful thing of such fury that it can consume cities. The naga smiles and blows out a crimson smoke ring as she puzzles her new weapon that has fallen, or rather been dropped into her presence. The naga bangs upon the roof of her carriage for the driver to speed on, and within moments the streets are quiet again. The hooded thing staggers on beneath towering walls and sloping gables where great spiders crawl, the arachnids cowering from the spider catchers who ply their trade in the dark. Both avoid the rooftops where ancient scrimshaw gargoyles call to each other in a haunting song. No one climbs to meet the scrimshaw, no one dares. The figure passes a burnt-out pawn shop and is ignored by a young couple in the doorway, seeing only each other. One of the figures has 2 mouths full of jutting yellow teeth. The other, possibly a man, is dead. Only alchemy keeps his own body upright. He appears to be ignoring the prostitute's shortcomings, or perhaps is paying for them. At last, the stitch thing reaches its destination, a crooked house lit by the distant lights of the great fair and the peculiar cutting beam of Hobbington's lamp, the greatest of sea lanterns. Now hobbling down the stairs, it gives a secret knock and is allowed into the alchemic opium den. Entering, it sees something in the mirror opposite, but the thing it sees is not its own reflection, and as it watches, the shadow moves out the looking glass and into the room. The hooded figure bows and hands over a package to the mirror dweller, who smiles crookedly and moves into the city night, drawing a shining meat cleaver as it does so. Singing a nursery rhyme under its breath, it breaks into a skip. Outside, countless other stories are taking place, misery and joy and lust and sin around here. This is our home. This is home to many, many things. The Blight is vast. It is mad and random and teeming with life. Each doorway conceals a secret, and every window a longing, every roof a hope and fear. A million faces stare from its broken soul. Each face hides a story. In the appendices, you'll find a printable player's introduction to the Blight, its characters, streets, and horrors. In essence, the Blight is a dark urban horror fantasy setting that can be used either on its own or mingled with other areas of your GM's campaign world. Many different races can trace their lineage back centuries in the Blight, and those Blight versions of standard races have developed their own unique abilities, contacts, and skills. In such a vast city, no guide can ever be considered entirely comprehensive, but there is a selection of new races and racial subtypes of the more established races commonly encountered. All the standard fantasy role-playing races can be met in Casteridge, but their environment may change. Local characters, as a dwarf living in the Arctic or an elf living in a coral reef, would change, but they are still unmistakably elves and dwarves. Races presented hereafter present Casteridge variations upon the core races, as well as new potential character races: Darrow, Briny, Sarcophagi, Night Slugs, and Swine. Racial subtypes of each of the core races are also represented. They have unique abilities due to their exposure and background in relation to the great city. Do not limit your choice to standard races. A party of ghoul characters make an excellent change of pace. Scum and were-rats also make interesting variations upon character races and enable you to develop a whole new skill set and viewpoint for your characters. Your GM will always point you in the direction she wishes her campaign to go, but do not be afraid to make suggestions. This is all, after all, a city of a million stories. New racial traits. A curious aspect of life in the Blight is that it suddenly, over generations, molds its inhabitants, exaggerating the effects on their physicalities and mentalities in the ways in which they apply themselves within its confines. For example, descendants of laborers are on average noticeably more hulking and brutish than their forebears, and descendants of scholars have, on average, wider eyes and larger craniums. Very grimy. Frog God Games, as a champion of old school games, has taken for its cue the race of racial subtypes. The same approach as was used in versions 3.0 and 3.5 and later iterations of the world's most popular fantasy role-playing game, with a more traditional method more akin to the concept of sub-races of old. This approach was held by Necromancer Games during its years of releasing 3.5 materials and has been carried through by the Frogs as well, most recently with the release of LL8 Bard's Gate, which is another module that they recently released. and the reintroduction of the street dwarf racial subtypes. It appears again in the shortly forthcoming Mountains of Madness with the mountain dwarf racial subtype. The latest iteration of the world's most popular fantasy role-playing game has returned to the more traditional use of subrace. However, for consistency between past and future projects, we have opted to continue using racial subtype in order to represent a subrace. Below, you'll find a new, completely optional racial traits and subtypes that can be used to add flavor and a distinctly Blight-like feel to your characters. Some of these are intended to replace existing racial traits, and others can be used independently of existing traits, and that is with all good things Frog God Games provides. The rules are here for you to pick and choose as you please, and as best suit your game. If you prefer to use the standard nomenclature regarding subraces, then drop the use of racial subtypes and go with subraces. As always, make of it what you will. Okay, it does occur to me that, I did make the mistake of not putting the title up in the chat, so I'm going to take a moment in order to do that. DriveThruRPG.com. Okay, the Blight. Alright, the Blight. See if we'd be able to find that here. The Blight. Oh, here it is. Okay, 5e. And then, just copy that, and then I will post that in the chat. Okay, Brady is reading. Right, 5e. Okay. Alright. There we are. And then let me just take a moment in order to pin that to the top of chat. Okay, there we are. So, okay. Back to the guide. Dwarven optional racial traits. Dwarven characters that start in or near the Blight may not exhibit the same traits that are traditionally associated with dwarves. Some of the new traits may be a specific trait that is intended to replace, but while others do not. For those that do specify which trait it would replace, you should work with your GM to determine the best fit of the game. The following racial traits may be selected instead of standard ones. A Blight Builder. Street dwarves in the Blight are especially talented builders and crafters. You gain expertise with artisan tools of your choice. Pick one from Smith's Tools, Brewer Supplies, Mason Tools, and this replaces the Tool Proficiency trait. Blight Enmity. Street dwarves have redirected traditional dwarven enmities against creatures that are specific to the Blight. Choose one type of creature. Between creatures, constructs, lycanthropes, or undead, choose a single type. When tracking this type of creature, you have advantage on wisdom, survival checks, and intelligence checks to recall details about the creature. If it speaks a specific language, you also learn that language when declaring your entity to the creature. City Sharp. Some Blight dwarves have very strong ties to the city. You have advantage on Blight-related intelligence, history checks, and on charisma, persuasion checks to gather information from within the Blight. And then trade expert. Some Blight dwarves are descended from families with a focus on the skilled trade. In matters of trade, you are considered an expert, allowing you to add 2 times your proficiency bonus to charisma persuasion checks when trading with others. And so, elves, optional racial traits. Artistic devotion. The Blight can transform elves of an artistic nature into obsessive practitioners, forever seeking the perfect expression of their form. You gain proficiency with one of the following: an instrument, calligrapher supplies, cartographer jewels, cook's utensils, glass blower tools, painter supplies, or woodcarver tools. Fey talents. Some Blight elves find that a talent for music, song, dance, or some other form of entertainment runs in their blood. You gain proficiency in acrobatics, performance, or sleight of hand. They have really built upon this setting, So it's effectively, it's a self-contained setting that has its own modifications. And at some point, they had modified this between 3.5 edition and 5th edition. So they have their own means of creating racial subtypes, and they give you the option of using those or using the ones that are still in 5e. Okay. Immersive memories. Some Blight elves are easily immersed within the memories of their ancient race and history and experiences. You have advantage on intelligence history attacks related to Caster Age and the Blight, the history of your race, and the major events that your ancestors experienced. Social spirit and inner guidance seems to shine some bright and some Blight elves positively influencing them with those whom they interact. You have advantage on charisma deception checks for any lie that you tell. Gnomes, optional racial traits. Alchemy Fiend. The Blight elevates some gnomes' obsession with alchemy into incredible talent. You're proficient with alchemist supplies. Crafting alchemical creations takes half the time and materials, and they cost 10% less in the market. Blight Blooded. Some gnome families have formed strong ties to the Blight through the latent action of their Fey origins. Their bonds strengthen your relations with other gnome families. You have advantage on charisma and wisdom insight checks when dealing with other gnomes from the Blight. Blight Enmity. Some Blight gnomes have redirected traditional gnomish enmities. Choose one type of creature between constructs like lycanthropes or undead. When tracking this type of creature, you have advantage on wisdom survival checks and then intelligence checks to recall details about the creature. If that creature speaks in a specific language, you can also learn that language. So a significant amount of these are like the chosen enemy ability that is standard in the 5e Ranger. They are making the suggestion that, if you live in the Blight, you have a racial background with lots of other people of different races, and if you do have a certain kind of grudge against creatures such as constructs, lycanthropes, or undead, then you are capable of gaining that based on your race. And so, what's really significant is that previously, I have slightly rallied against the principle that, anything should directly be tied to race. I think it is more pertinent that it is tied to background. But I think they're doing it in at least a clever enough way, whereas that, if you live in a specific area in the world, you are inclined to have a standing grudge with undead and dark magic. So that's the reason that they include it. And so that's reasonable, but still there's a significant amount of that still just might be built into background. I mean, all of these people, they live in the Blight, they live among undead. They are more than likely going to dislike things that are undead. And so it doesn't matter what race you are, it's just that you live in this part of the world. But yeah, I digress. Half-elves, optional racial traits. Emotional remote, torn between two worlds. Some Blight half-elves have grown emotionally distant to those around them. You have advantage on saving throws against being compelled against your will. Racial ambiguity. The Blight suppresses the elven appearance of some half-elves, allowing them to pass easily as a different race while emphasizing a talent for assuming alternative identities. You are proficient with a disguise kit, and you have advantage on ability checks that would expose your identity while you're disguised. Half-orcs, optional racial traits. Slum survivors. Some half-orcs are skilled at surviving in the slums, sewers, and underbellies. You have advantage on dexterity and wisdom survival checks within an urban environment. In addition, you can use survival to find food and water in an urban environment. A successful DC 10 survival check results in enough sustenance for one person for one day. Or night bread. The Blight molds some half-orcs towards the darkness, emphasizing their subterranean heritage. Your eyes are attuned to dark and dim conditions beyond that of others, your race granting you superior dark vision, but also shackling you with sunlight sensitivity. Your dark vision has a radius of 120 feet. You have advantage on attack rolls and wisdom that rely on sight when you and your target are in direct sunlight. Halflings, optional racial traits. Deaf dancers. Some Blight halflings are infused with the rhythm and the beat of a city's dark heart. Choose one of the following options: proficiency and performance with one type of musical instrument, proficiency in acrobatics, and advantage on dexterity acrobatics checks when entertaining an audience. Rigging rats. Some halflings have Blight charged agility. You have advantage on stealth athletic checks when climbing. Climbing also does not have a half your speed. River running. Many Blight halflings are drawn to waterways. Painting the line with inborn expertise. You have advantage on stealth athletics checks when swimming. Furthermore, you're proficient with navigator's tools and waterborne vehicles. Humans, optional racial traits. City Soul. Within the Blight, you add your proficiency bonus to your wisdom, perception, wisdom, insight, and dexterity stealth checks. In addition, once per day, you can become lost in thought in a trance-like state for 1 minute to subconsciously plumb their knowledge of the city. At the end of the trance, you can make a charisma persuasion check. With advantage, you regain the ability to become lost in thought after a long rest. Recall you have an advantage on intelligence history checks in relation for knowing the urban geography of the Blight, the fastest method to get from one location to another, and for finding specific locations within the city. In addition, you can spend at least 1 minute concentrating on the surroundings that you know, which district you are in, even if you cannot see your surroundings. And polluted, the city itself seems infected with choking gases and corrosive chemicals, yet some humans seem to thrive in even the most pollutant-rich environments. You've developed an innate resistance to conditions and have advantage on saving throws against inhaled poisons and toxins. Twilight sight, touched by exotic blood or brethren. Some humans can see better in their kin in dim light conditions. You have limited dark vision within a radius of 30 feet. So this is one on me, as this is the first time that I have seen an explanation for humans having dark vision. Water-blooded, they say that blood is thicker than water, but for some Blight humans, the waters of the lime seem to run through their veins. You have the ability to hold your breath for twice as long as others. You have advantage on Constitution saving throws when holding your breath underwater, and have a base swim speed of 20 feet. I like it. I like it. These guys live in virtual darkness. They have their eyes attuned to dark conditions, and so have 30 feet of dark vision. Okay. New racial subtypes, the street dwarf. The street dwarves were originally mountain dwarf stock, but all trace of their descent to a single band of exiles from the Great Mountain Clan, Targ in the Forlorn Mountains. Called Gilio's Brigade, the dwarves of this band have been cast out of the Great Clan for any number of petty crimes. The band relocated into the lowlands for the newly formed domain of Hawkmoon. After leaving their mountain home, found solace in the wild towns springing up across this new frontier. Their natural skills as craftsmen soon made them wealthy and allowed them to establish shops, inns, way stations, and merchant houses. In less than a century, they had largely abandoned their old dwarven culture and began to establish their own rich traditions. Since their early days in Hawkmoon, street dwarves have spread far and wide to many of the world's major urban cities. Commerce is their livelihood, and they simply follow the coin. They are savvy urbanites who know the ins and outs of city life. Well aware of the dangers of the cities, pickpockets, footpads, thieves' guilds, corrupt officials, and assorted con artists, street dwarves have developed a characteristic wariness of all strangers that borders on paranoia. They are shrewd and cunning and difficult to trick, especially when money is involved. It's equally difficult to intimidate or accost them because, although they have distanced themselves from their heritage as doughy, giant, and orc fighters, they still remain a race of the stout folk that are notoriously hard of head and still hard of knuckle in any barroom, in brawl or alley robbery attempt. Physical description. In appearance, street dwarves differ very little from one city to next, having all descended from a single clan. They have the height of mountain dwarf, with most approaching 5 feet in height, though they are thinner and less stocky of build. Consequently, they tend to be more agile than their mountainous cousins. Their beards are the darker shades of mountain dwarves with a smattering of silvery white even among the younger folk, but they are usually kept trimmed shorter and closer to the chin than is typical for a dwarf. Hair is likewise usually kept at a shorter length, but hair and beards are always kept well groomed and fashionably styled. Some street dwarf women are clean shaven, as is the normal females of other races with whom they interact. Street dwarf attire remains social caste and climate where they live, but often an expression of the affluence that they have achieved over the years. Society. The clan kingship, so strongly felt among mountain dwarves and even hill dwarves, is largely absent among street dwarves. Although they all descend from a single clan, upon their arrival in the lowlands, they spread out to settle and take on the lowland ways. Now street dwarves relate more closely to immediate family groups. Although they feel kinship with fellow street dwarves, it is no more than a vague sense of camaraderie, no more binding than any other consequences they make. Although street dwarves, are wealthy merchants and business owners, must make a comfortable living in some trade that they have undertaken while they amass great wealth in trade investments or sneeze coming and others. Phew, there it is. All right. Their fortunes fallen on hard times or from families that either lost or never made the great leap into affluence that some of their kin have. In all regards, street dwarves tend to reflect the majority of the society in which that they live. Um, Relations. Thank you, Devin. As mentioned, street dwarves lack the extreme kin bonding found among mountain and hill dwarves. In fact, they often find mountain and hill dwarves that they meet to be comforting and uncomfortably intense, if not outright uncouth. For the most part, other dwarves typically look at street dwarves askance, as if poor souls who have lost their way among the baubles and fancies of the soft lowlanders. In any case, the groups can maintain friendly relations with one another, but rarely seek out any more social contact than is absolutely necessary. Street dwarves do not maintain the same prejudices towards other races that their kin do, and therefore have no more animosity towards goblins or orcs than any would towards any other brigand. Likewise, they have no experience in fighting giants, most likely never having seen one. Instead, they hold their ire towards those that they see as oppressing them, whether it be criminals or corrupt officials, or a wealthy merchant or street bullies, and corrupt city guards for a beggar. It is towards these that street dwarves avert their legendary dwarven grudges. Religion, street dwarves are most likely to be agnostic or outright atheists. They're pragmatic and practically minded, putting more faith in sound investments and a solid plan than divine protection or tradition. Those that are of a religion bent usually venerate the major gods of trade whenever they happen to live, but they tend to shy away from elven deities, as flighty, strange, and traditional dwarven deities is somehow familiar yet uncomfortably alien. Some street dwarves, especially those that dwell in the domain of Hawkmoon, still worship the Hawkmoon deity, for their ancestors took their name. Gilio, god of travel and caprice. Outside Hawkmoon, though, such worship is little seen. Adventurers may not call so powerfully to street dwarves as it does members of other races, as these folks usually prefer the known dangers of city life to the unknown dangers of the open wilderness. Nonetheless, they can sometimes be found among adventuring bands, if for no other reason than the irresistible lure of treasure. So, racial traits, intelligence increases by 1, age makes up to young until the age of 50 and considered to live between 3 and 4 centuries. Size, alignment the same, size the same. Base walking speed is 25 feet, which is a little bit shorter. Dark vision, up to 60 feet. Greed gives you advantage on intelligence checks made to determine the price of non-magical goods, regardless of what they're made of. Grudge, someone or something crossed you at some point, and you'll never forgive that sight. Little do they know, dwarves hold grudges like no other. Pick an NPC or a character or a creature that represents an injustice or a harmful treatment you have endured. Regardless of whether they wronged you, they are the object of your violent obsession. When you score a critical hit against your hated foe, you roll 1 additional damage dice and add the extra damage of the critical hit. Because of your hatred, you have disadvantage on charisma-based skill checks against them. Streetwise, advantage on wisdom perception checks. Urbanite, proficiency bonus to charisma deception, wisdom insight, and charisma persuasion checks when used in urban surroundings. And weapon familiarity, you have proficiency with short swords, rapiers, and whips. This replaces dwarven combat training. Languages, you can read, speak, and write Common and Dwarvish. Okay. Elf, primitive. Primitives are elves who have found themselves drawn to the strange, almost otherworldly allure that seems to shine just beneath the surface of the Blight, for those with the sensitivity to see it. A result of their long exposure to this strange, intangible presence, ever tickling at their minds, has led them to devote their lives to an expression in art. They are fey, almost elemental creatures, inspired and tortured by wildly vivid dreams to the point of obsession over an act of creation to bring their dream visions to life. They may stand for hours immersed in the light play of Sun in the Gables, entranced by reactions of an admixture of venoms, or crafting the perfect expression in a musical movements about the unique potpourri of odors produced by a particular alleyway. Primitives tend to stand taller and are more willowy than a typical elf, rarely within an ounce of fat on their bodies, as they devote every waking moment and their energy to the perfection of their art. Some with an Epicurean bent lie on the opposite end of the spectrum, representing the shocking phenomenon of a morbidly obese elf. They share the same almond-shaped eyes of other elves, but their wide irises are always completely black, blending seamlessly with their pupils, and creating the impression of looking into a vast bottomless well. Their clothing tends towards minimalist ideals and ranges in quality from a few diaphanous veils or scars to little more than a rough loincloth. They see their bodies as another form of an expression of their art and wish to reveal their canvas to as many as they can see, regardless of physique, injury, or deformity. Exotic and extravagant tattoos, often covering much of their bodies, are not uncommon. In the cold winters of Blight, they bundle up in rough primitive garments of hide and thick fur, channeling the inner nature they sense within the walls of the city. The hygiene of these hells vary wildly, with some taking great pride in their physical aesthetic, and others seeing such concerns as mundanely gauche, preferring to revel in a natural state of filth. Morbidly obese elf, is that possible? It's possible in the city. The city does this to many people. I spent most of my life in the city, and look at me. I got a big old belly. Religion. Primitives have all the emotional capriciousness of other elves that tend to lack much for value or kindness or any concept of beauty that lies outside their own personal obsessions. Most primitives are chaotic, but very few of them are good. Primitives are never lawful. Many primitives gravitate towards agnostic or atheistic beliefs, as all other matters are subordinated to their personal obsessions. Some do, however, venerate deities that represent certain types of art, freedoms, or simply hedonism in general. Among the primitives, some of the more commons are Dame Torin, Macabello, Bacchus, Dionysus, the Queen of Spiders, Pambers, Ursia, Pelora, Eliphaz, Aroles, Saoirse, Gelio, the Demogorgon, Bast, Tiamat, the Church of Marwyn, the Poppy's Chorus, and one of the largest chapters of the Count of the Unspeakable in the Lost Lands. Yeah, Buddha belly. It is absolutely true. I feel it scrape against the stairs when I walk up them. A few even call the blessings of the Ash Queen or the Horseman above all. They feel the demon lord of Margoth the Mad, knowing full well, even in their indolence, that to fully succumb to the madness is to lose their vision entirely. There are rumors, however, some primitives who are done that very thing and now perfectly seek to propagate the spread of the insidious cult amongst their powers. In addition, it's not unusual to see a new cult spring up amongst a group of primitives dedicated to some holy or partially fabricated deity, drawn from an exotic land or a prehistoric past viewed as somehow purer or more visceral. Without the backing of a true deity to provide any sort of evidence of divine inspiration, these small cults usually dissolve in a matter of days or months at the most. While they exist, though, some of them can become quite dangerous or vicious in their ideals or any physical excess at any cost. Adventurers, while harrowing, strenuous life of an adventurer holds little appeal for the most languid primitives. For those whose imagination it does capture, little can hold them back. For them, something of the vision they seek to actualize lies in the chaotic freedom and risk of adventuring, and they jump to the life with both feet. Although those are few rigors they won't endure, dangers they won't face, and risks that they won't take for the sake of their passions. Suggestions of name, eschewing the names of their elven heritage. They prefer to take on monosyllabic mononyms that portray the underlying truth of them being, or poetic descriptions that seek to do the same. To most others, their names seem pretentious, nonsensical, or both. Nail names include Check, Durst, Flowerfire, Pum, Quella Stone, Rand the Sidefall, Son of Nos, Slave Maid, Blue, Tac Tac, Thorn, Tutho, Aquillo, and Wholewinds. Female names are Abundance, Encounter upon Green, Radiance of Light, Light and Never Noise, Perfect, Pain for Promise, Rain, Sash, Two, Sides Through, Under, Lives, Peace, and Willow. Maybe it's Under Lives Peace. Under Lives Peace, Under Lives Peace. Whichever one makes more sense as a name. Racial traits, charisma increases by 1. Same amount of age. all potential alignments, 5.5 to 6 feet tall size, walking speed is 30 feet, dark vision is still 60 feet, city knowledge, artistic devotion, forever seeking the perfect expression of their form. You gain proficiency with one of the following: an instrument of your choice, calligrapher, supplies, cartographer tools. Fey talent quite often focus on the talent for music, song, dance, or some other form of entertainment. Proficiency in acrobatics, performance, or sleight of hand. Dream speakers, primitives have the ability to tap into the power of sleep, dreams, and prescient reverie. Once per day, you can cast a dream spell. Charisma is your spellcasting ability. Know your own. Advantage on charisma, persuasion, and wisdom insight checks involving fellow primitives. Okay, and then language, capable of writing Common and Elfish. Okay. The Trade Lord Gnome. Trade Lord Gnomes are a common sight amongst the financial areas of the city. They are cunning and astute, good judges of character and risk, and their talents are in demand by the legal, financial, and speculative professions, as well as the less legal arms of those groups. In many ways, their reputation resembles that of the street dwarves in other urban areas throughout Akados. But whereas the street dwarves are known for being hardworking business owners and workers, Trade Lord Gnomes are specifically involved as financiers, bankers, commodity speculators, investors, and trade factors at the highest echelons of local and international trade. And while they are known for their business acumen, they're not especially well regarded for their scruples. A business always feels more comfortable with a Trade Lord Gnome on the side of a negotiating table, but much less comfortable with one on the opposite side. Trade Lord Gnomes superficially resemble a handful ordinary gnomes, but all Trade Lord Gnomes are descended from a handful of castrate gnome families. All tend to bear a certain family resemblance. Their hair tends towards muted shades of brown, red, and green, although gray and silver never seem to predominate even at relatively young ages. In addition, there is an unusually high incidence of balding among their numbers. Eyebrows are always thick and bushy with wide hooked noses and large protruding ears. Their thick, brushy mustaches and sometimes sideburns are extremely common, though beards are never worn. Their skin also tends to be more pallid compared to their kin, as frequently extremely thin, almost parchment-like, with a spider web of tiny veins visible on the cheeks, chin, nose, and ears. Eyes tend to be bleary and slightly jaundiced. Myopia is very common, with many Trade Lord Gnomes wearing spectacles before they reach adulthood. Trade Lord Gnomes are extremely preoccupied with social class and form. They are extremely proud of their castrate lineage from a few well-placed families, with those involved in the politics and finances of the city dating back centuries. With family names such as Brothelwaite, Cunningham, Evandon, and Shipwright, they feel like they are the cream of the crop within the city-state, and a name that should lock doors and immediately that should open doors and get immediate recognition from the unwashed low folk. Okay, so I got that completely reversed. The fact that none of their family names is even remotely as well known as the Upset, Dart, Polar, Magician Shortstones, and their seemingly endless progeny irks the families of the Trade Lords to no end, though they will never let on to being disturbed by a notion so far beneath them. Relations. Trade Lord Gnomes tend to get on well with most other races, if at a comfortable and coolly indifferent arm's length. They hold ordinary gnomes in utter contempt. However, the city's low folk recognize them as movers within the Blight social strata, and the upper class see them as formidable and respectable professionals, if not particularly friendly or suitable for socializing. Trade Lord Gnome's actual standoffishness actually serves them in their relationships with others, because it makes them seem stuffy and competent, while at the same time masking their inclination towards pompousness, biting condensation. The few that manage to come to a Trade Lord Gnome almost always find them rude and unpleasant, but worthwhile companions nonetheless for their astute and judgment and considerable skills at the bargaining table. Favorite religions are Sephigreth, Terranun, Archelius, and Iskadar, and Nubdar are more than a few who secretly revered Lord Mammon. Noticeably absent are the worship of trade lord gnomes and the worship of their chaotic racial deity, Hammer Mittelschmerz. Adventurers. Trademark gnomes seldom become adventurers, but some find the thrill of the discovery of new trade markets and the victory over opposing forces as a great draw, and become sea captains, caravan leaders, or even trade negotiators in the most hostile of environments. Um, so no racial traits other than languages, Common, Gnomish, and Semuric or Zayon, which I believe are languages that are exclusive to this set. Okay. The half orc Shadow Lamper. Shadow Lampers, as they're typically called. Oh, you know what? I made a mistake. Okay, the racial traits are actually down here. I just skipped an entire paragraph. Okay. Charisma increases by 1, 350, 500 years of age. Um, Alignments tend to be towards lawful good or lawful evil. Trademark Lord Gnomes commonly between 3 or 4 feet tall and 40 small. Walking is 25 feet. Um, Dark vision, city knowledge, keen senses, know your own, truth twister, quick wits, and even quicker tongue are your trademark. You're especially talented at negotiating, lying, and discerning lies. Advantage on charisma, deceptions, and wisdom insight checks. Urban magic, like many other gnomes, the Blight has altered the inherently magical nature of Trade Lord gnomes. This allows you to cast each of the following spells without components: Floating Disc, Knock, Message, and Unseen Servant. Wow. Yeah, just basically all the transport spells for free. Um, the spellcasting is Charisma, um, proficiency with swords, rapiers, and whips, and the ability to write and speak Common, Gnomish, and Semuric or Zayon. Okay, there we go. This place does some really miserable stuff to people. Well, I mean, that's just kind of the general theme, you know. If you want a much more grim and gritty role-playing city settings, then and it's more than likely that a great amount of these scenarios are just going to actually be taking place in the city. So the fact that everything is geared towards that concept is very advantageous to the players. All right, so the half orc shadow lamp. Shadow lamps, as they're typically called, are half orcs in the Blight, born pale, sick, and sickly looking. The light still hurts the enlarged eyes of the half orcs, sometimes referred to as vampires, ghouls, or undead by other city folk. They prefer to do business by night. To many, however, the shadow lamper is a boon. Someone who prefers at night can come in very handy, not only to criminal underclasses, but also amongst more legitimate professions. The Queen's Force shadow lampers are now part of the City Watch, with a waiting list of 7 years to join and the toughest entry test in the entire watch. The Illuminati have made great use of shadow lampers, and these half orcs are also ranked amongst some of the most famous spider hunters in the city's history. Shadow lamp half orcs are tall, like their more common kin, easily exceeding 6 feet, but lack the sheer muscle mass of their cousins. Their bodies are thin and corded, with wiry muscle that makes them look more like scarecrows or cadavers than a typical half orc, and their skins tend to run paler than the dusky or greenish hues more frequently found. They have wide eyes with large pupils that are frequently bloodshot and teary of bright lights. Though their lower canines are less prominent than is normal for half orcs, they are nevertheless somewhat elongated, and the fact that their upper canines are likewise hypertrophied only adds to the conspiracy that they're some sort of blood-drinking undead beast. Society. As products of a wholly urban environment, shadow lampers do not suffer the persecution and ostracization seen by societies of both of a typical half-orc's parents. This is partially because shadow lamp half-orcs are the offspring of maiden shadow lamp half-orcs. The initial half-orcs are the initial orc-human crossing, having occurred generations in the past. This is also because with so many underclasses in the Blight, held with equal disdain by the upper crust of society, it's too much trouble for a lone segment to be singled out for a specific prejudice. They receive the hardships and privations of a second-class citizen. But then, so do most folk of the Blight, so it seems, like no unique burden to the Shadow Lampers. Relations with no special prejudice leveled against them in the city of their birth, and a generations-long disassociation from the separate cultures of their progenitors, Shadowlamp half-orcs get along with the other races that inhabit the city, just as they would any other. No special grudges are harbored, no great blood feuds recognized. A shadow leper on the streets of the city would have the same possibility to like or dislike an elf he met on the street as he would an orc. But some folk are put off by their cadaverous appearance and exhibit a prejudice amongst those lines. They respect a command for the work that they do, and the myriad of other racial prejudices that swell from the disparate folk of the Blight causes shadow lampers to not feel singled out as a target of vitriol by any particular group. Few shadow lampers do observe a formal religion and tend to gravitate towards aspects of the night, such as gravitate towards those that favor the shadows, such as Mercia or Sister Shadow, or other aspects of the night, such as Nara, or even relating to the accusation of Vanithu. A shadow lamper worshipping Grotag is unheard of, but most pay no attention to any religion in particular. As adventurers skilled in a certain line of work, but particular guarding, watching, or hunting at night or in the dark places of the city, shadow lampers make excellent adventurers and are drawn to such a life. Okay, so strength increases by 1, dexterity by 2, rarely live longer than 75 years, have no great propensity toward evil and chaos. Likewise, they hold no special fondness for good or law. They're just likely to be as chaotic evil and chaotic good. Shadowlamp half-orcs are tall and lean, mostly exceeding 6 feet in height for both genders. Base walking speed is 30 feet. Superior dark vision up to a radius of 120 feet. Sunlight sensitivity, disadvantage in sunlight. City knowledge, you have knowledge on your intelligence history checks related to a specific city or district. Know your own, keen sight, advantage on wisdom saving throws. Weapon familiarity, great axe, great sword, and maul. You can speak, read, and write common, oak, and undercommon. The Shadowlamp half-orc is a variant of the half-orc described in the game manual. It is not a subtype and will not possess the same traits as non-variant half-orcs. So, they make the distinction by saying that, this is a completely indifferent, racialized version of an orc. So you can't use both these stats and the stats that are in the orc guide. Alright. Okay, Gypsy Gal Halfling. Consummate traders and tricksters, Gypsy souls are halflings who feel a deep and abiding kindred for the Veronoi gypsy folk of Actos. Though not related to those wandering tribes by blood, the gypsy souls have associated them for so many generations that these halfling bloodlines indeed seem more closely akin to the Veroni than their own kind. In fact, the gypsy souls speak the Rama language of the Veroni and generally keep to their own neighborhoods, caravans, or encampments rather than mix extensively with others. The exceptions to this, of course, are the Veroni themselves, who see the gypsy souls as kindred little brothers and sisters, and the halfling folk of Casterhage. Interaction with the city, however, can draw some of their insolent natures, at least for a time. Gypsy souls support themselves out as tinkers, traders, and in the performance of odd jobs whenever possible. Some have small animal herds. So this is a peculiar one for me, and this is probably one that I'm going to give a thumbs down to, because, okay, these days, I don't know specifically when this book was written, but, these days, gypsy is considered to be a racial slur. I mean, so, there's just kind of a lot of difficult history towards it, whether or not, it was a race or a ethnicity in our times. But it's also just kind of the fact that, they are making a distinction that, these halflings are modeled after the Veroni of Akados. So something that they could do as an alternative is that they could refer to these as Veroni halflings as opposed to the cultural surname, which would simply have been Veroni. Yeah, there's definitely alternatives. And so, yeah, if I were ever to run this, I would probably just replace Gypsy with Veroni. And so that is a significantly better way to look at it. Let's see if we can test out my theorem in the rest of this paragraph. Veroni souls, in general, conform to, it's also just the fact that they call themselves souls. It's not even really, this is a matter of soul. This is a matter of cultural and ethnic distinction. So probably just say, Veroni halflings. Veroni halflings in general conform to the physical appearance of their halfling kin. They tend to be a little bit taller, some reaching the outlandish height of 3 foot 6 inches, and a bit leaner, rarely having the paunch from a life of prosperity and good meals that tend to find their way into many halflings as they reach middle age. They almost always go barefoot, which is not unusual for halflings, and their ears are less pointed, in some cases being completely indistinguishable from human ears and shapes. Their thick curly hair tends towards a dark brown and black, with many wearing black sideburns and even short beards, though rarely mustaches, and have a tendency to gray early, with many having thick streaks of white running through their unruly mops at a relatively young age. Their eyes share dark shades similar to a shade darker than the almond coloration of typical halflings, possibly from a greater exposure to the sun in their wandering lifestyle. They quickly develop many fine lines and wrinkles from their years in the sun, and a tendency towards laughter, though this does not make them appear older as much as it does seem jollier and more world-wise. Though I hear it's kind of tricky in real-life applications because gypsy isn't an acceptable term by English-speaking, let's say, travelers. But I think generally traveler works best. I mean, so it's a way in order to just kind of distinguish, a specific ethnic group as being an ethnic group that is always going to serve as an immigrant in a particular society. And that by itself is also just very particularly ugly. It shows a significant amount of cultural bias. Like the Veroni wanderers that they've come to identify with, Veroni halflings spend most of their life traveling through the roads of Akados in caravans or small wagons. They are frequently included as part of a Veroni caravan, but not always so. When they are with the Veroni, they are treated as one of their own and answer to the tribe's reigning matriarch, as do their human kinfolk. This arrangement is very egalitarian in that, on many occasions, the Veroni themselves answer to a halfling, a Veroni halfling matriarch if she is the most senior member of the caravan. On the open road or in an encampment, Veroni halflings are prone to music, dancing, and the telling of elaborate jokes. They do not involve themselves in pranks very frequently because they are accustomed to living on few resources and among hostile people, so that anything that might damage another property of dignity is seen as detrimental to their survival. Rather, they confine their internal rivalries to clever jests and barbs for the amusement of all. And a Veroni halfling that knows that she's been bested, enjoys the roast as much as any onlookers, and begins planning his future rejoinder almost immediately. Pranks among non-Veroni halflings, however, is an entirely different matter, and truly legendary members of their families are those who can pull the most outlandish pranks upon their people. Relations. But folk look upon the Veroni as roving skulks and thieves. They look upon the Veroni halflings who associate with them as little better than an infestation of vermin. Oh, wow. Well, that was a pretty clear... That's true. That one crept up on me. That's a pretty clear giveaway as, how they want the gaze to be towards this group. Is that even less than the people who are considered to be the thieves of the human ethnicity that they probably didn't even ask for in the first place. And so, I'm probably not going to go too much into culture here because, this could stand to use a good scrubbing. Bless you, and also, geez. Their love of life on the road makes adventuring a natural choice, so many would claim that adventuring is their only occupation, whether they be an aged caravan matriarch, mischievous street urchin, or an established urban tinker. The drama of adventurer's life is one of the reasons that carry many Veroni halflings who establish themselves in cities such as Casteridge eventually abandon their sedentary life and take to the roads again. Have the typical naming conventions and names of those among the Veroni: Alfonso, Andrej, Baldo, Hanzo, Luca, Marco, Stefan, and Toman. All ancient Italian names. Maybe post-Greek, but definitely early Italian names. Let's see. Okay, so reach maturity at the age of 20, live 150 years. Chaotic by nature, though really truly evil. Um, Advantage on intelligence history checks. Yeah, city knowledge, keen senses, know your own. Okay. Um, Once again, Gypsy can't. So, it's really, that would just be actually Veroni can't, is just the language that is spoken amongst the people of the Veroni clans. Um, Shiftless, a reputation for larceny and guile, and sometimes well deserved. Proficiency bonus to charisma and dexterity sleight of hand checks. Okay, well. Okay. While what we read earlier seemed to be, particularly keen when it came to adding racial abilities, this is precisely the thing that I tend to protest against. Is that the fact that you are a race and you just have a certain proficiency towards being a rogue, then at this point you're really just kind of pointing the race towards the class, and in that situation it might just be better in order to allow your players to pick their own class. All right, so here, so we're going on for that. We're going to go on to the blighted human. It's a particular facet of the blight that those who dwell there notice a subtle change over many generations, almost as though their deeds truly become tattooed on their bodies. This is true in general only for those who have several generations of caster age in their kin. Those who manage to escape, who throw off their shackles even for a year, and who by good fortune are somehow immune to this effect, are in some way unaffected. Like, yeah, that's a min-max combo for this class. Yeah, and in a way, it really just kind of seems like the GM is holding up a great big sign that says, "Okay, play this as a rogue," and that just kind of still doesn't really knock particularly well for me, especially when it comes to the fact that you're considering this to be part of their racial background. It could even really, like, once again, okay, it's already we're already in a pretty confused situation where we're discussing gypsies as a race as opposed to an ethnicity, when it's clearly things should be an ethnicity, and if it's an ethnicity, it's more likely to be a background. Okay, well, rant over. All right. Okay, others are not so lucky, and the kinship manifests in subtle changes within the bodies of those who come from long lines of locals. Those who use their bodies for brute force, the builders, laborers, and roofers, can be identified by having peculiarly large hands or shoulders or backs. Miners develop wider eyes with larger pupils. Chimney sweeps an unsettling ability to voluntarily dislocate their limbs. Nobility may be chimney sweeps. To voluntarily dislocate their limbs. If you're a chimney sweep, you have an unsettling ability to voluntarily dislocate your limbs. That's what they're saying. Okay. Nobility may be tainted by generations of envy or lust and have peculiarly feral or angered expressions. In general, these changes are not monstrous, but are all the more unsettling for their subtlety. Blighted humans are typical of Western Echodos. Their skin tones are usually somewhat pale and range from sallow and ivory to pinkish, all the way to the almost pure white of albinism, whereas most Western Echodos tends towards more aquiline features. Those of the blighted are usually coarser and somewhat broader. Their hair runs into the same dark browns, auburns, and black of Western Echodos, and their eyes are a range of pale blue-gray, bluish black, dark brown, and pale violet. As noticed, their physical features do tend to reflect the sort of occupation their family has held for many generations, though these changes are subtle and fall well within the normal physical morphology to be found within the population. Okay, if you're a human albino, there is actually a good possibility that your eyes might be violet. Society. No single social stratum fits the blighted. They can be from the lowest of the city's gutters to the marble galleries and halls of the capital. In fact, a member of the blighted could even identify himself as such. Is that even people that have been born and completely and totally contaminated by the city are capable of having ascension in the human area. Let's see. A physic. Let me just start off with that paragraph. Okay, no single social stratum fits the Blighted. They can be from the lowest to the marble galleries of the capital. In fact, a member of the Blighted would not even identify himself as such. Being one of the Blighted is not a recognized classification. It's simply a physical reality of those whose families have dwelt in the city-state long enough for the physical changes to occur. This is reflected in that the one feature that all truly have in common is their ancestry's long residence with within Castor Age. Relations, like humans elsewhere, the relations of the Blighted run the gamut. Religion, the Blighted have a higher tendency to follow the religious indigenous to the city of Castor Age, as opposed to those of elsewhere in Actos. There are many exceptions to this, however, as the folk of Castor Age includes immigrants from across the world of Lager who have brought their native beliefs from their new homes. By far the largest human congregation of any god in Castor Age is that of Mother Grace, the city's de facto patron deity. The adventuring life is among the Blighted is more dependent on their occupation and their circumstances than their race. An indolent nobleman with money to burn and free time to spend might take up adventuring as a pastime to relieve his boredom, whereas a low folk woman living in the gutter and begging or picking pockets to feed herself might see it as an opportunity to increase her prosperity. Male names, just ordinary human names. Ability runs by 1. Okay, so I'm sure age, alignment, size, and speed is all the same as a human. City knowledge, city soul, know your own. Recall, you have an advantage on intelligence history checks in relation to knowing the urban geography of the Blight, the fastest method to get from one location to another, and finding specific locations within the city. It's a very city-specific version of Streetwise. In addition, you can spend at least 1 minute concentrating on your surroundings and know which district you are in, even if you can't see your surroundings. The blending human is a variant of the standard human described as the in-game manual. It is not a subtype and will not possess the same traits as non-variant humans. Okay. New races. Okay. Briny, the half-grum, I think. Hang on. I just need to find it in a font that isn't romanized. Okay. Fishermen spit when they hear the name mentioned. Briny fish bread. Formed union between scum and the wives of men. Okay, so I think it's a half scum. That's what the name is. The humans hate the children that flounder in the streets. Children more at home in the cold, dark waters in the lands of the sun and air. They are children that they say have some purpose in being on land. Children that remind them of the soul that created them. Children that hate the day, hate the sun. Yet they are attracted to it like moths to a flame, their eyes wandering painfully as they stare into the glow of the summer, or praying for someone to turn off the lights. So this is a variation on the fish people that already exist. I'm having a hard time remembering what they're called in 5e. But, we understand that this is, a twice converted book. It went from Pathfinder to 3.5 and now it's in 5e. So at some point, when they wrote this, they weren't aware of them, creating an official fish person subclass. So, they just decided to come over here. They come from the deep and cold places below, watching the warmth of landmen's wives with greedy eyes that want to steal. Scum lurk everywhere in the city, and a local strain constantly seek a human mate to take and impregnate. If a scum is not born, the union is cast out along with a number by the scum, who is bound by the ancient ritual not to kill them. Wow. Okay. Yeah, that I completely and totally regret having read that. It's really just the fact that these people, are using the urban environment in order to steal their husbands and wives, which is something that can be a very specific scenario and not necessarily something that can be attributed to the entire race. The women, the women, called bride mothers by most folk, often come back poor, silent creatures that they are, no matter what they were like before. They always bring back what they've been given, the poor taken wives, but never tell what they saw or what happened to them. The given thing is called a briding, and hated although it is well known amongst the fishermen that to kill a child means to also kill the wife, for many have tried. Many have killed the fallen infant in hopes of freeing the wife, only to have her hanged a few days later, always by her own hand. Gosh, that's awful. Well, yeah, that is too real. Um, I don't know if you're in a situation where you might want to play this for the class cohesiveness, then you know that one's your call. But I just think that's a bit too reprehensible for most parties to involve themselves in. Yeah, I hate this town. This is dark. Yeah. Um, some are more human than others, but each is deformed in some way, and about a quarter of them slowly change as they age. I mean, so you're really just trying to create, a sub race entirely out of people who are outcasted, um, have born into this world because of a presumed crime, and then just continue to live street urchin like existences. You know, it's a lurid sort of interesting immediately. And I'm sure the GM is capable of playing this off in a way that works really well within what they are potentially doing. But in a more general sense, it's not good to take these kinds of concepts and put them in race. And so we've seen more than 2 or 3 detrimental examples here. If you want to run into something, if you want to attempt to run something like this, and it's perfectly okay to look at it a certain way, but looking at it a certain way is looking at it in the same primeval way that kind of spawned the tropes in the first place. It would be, like I said, this would all more or less work out amongst groups if all of this stuff wasn't in race. And so, that just kind of brings me back to my initial point. If these things weren't in race, then it would entirely be acceptable that these kinds of things are in a backstory of a character of any race. You can't, just say, well, there's just a group of, reviled half fish people that have sexually assaulted every one of their potential partners, and just kind of have that slide throughout the entirety of a campaign, at a table, surrounded by people who might object to the content. And it's also the fact that there's just a strange sort of bias that exists. The fact that the fish people, and I've already stated that fish people exist elsewhere in 5e. That fish people exists, and not they exist in a way that is not just so completely and wholly detrimental to the existence of fish people. It's all about backgrounds. It's not necessarily about races. Even some minor tweaks of the writing would fix it much. Well, if not all of it, yeah. And so, if these kinds of tropes are left up to character creation, then you know who to blame directly at the table. The fact that is just kind of part of the book. That's something like dealer's choice at this point. Okay. Chorophagy, roach folk. And okay, let me just lead in by saying that, if this somehow comes out more positive than the scum, then I probably have some questions. All right. In a society of social grades, chorophagy or roach folk are truly scrapings from the bottom of the barrel, reviled by all. The roach folk live almost invisibly within the city-state, restricting their movements and habitats to areas where others wouldn't care to look for, or the sheltering darkness of the night that hides them from the eyes who might take umbrage at their very existence. It's thought that roach folk originally must have hailed from between or some other vile plane, because no records speak from their existence before the rise to the city-states, and they're largely unknown elsewhere on the continent. That is in the freaking name. They eat poop. They're chorophagy. The fact that they bear a very vague resemblance to is not that the roach folk originally must have held between some other vile plane, because no records speak of their existence before the rise of the city-states. and are largely unknown elsewhere on the continent. The fact that they bear a vague resemblance to dwarves, however, speaks of a far closer and more tragic origin. Oh my god. Although no one amongst these dwarves speak of such a thing, and they would violently choose anyone who attempted to lay such a claim. For the part, the Chorophagi keep to themselves and avoid contact with others whenever possible for fear of instigating pogroms against their very existence. The circumstances occurred more than once in the past. The fact that they continue to survive within the Blight and in significant numbers is a testimony to their ruggedness and adaptability. Yeah, Corpo Poop Phage Eater. I mean, so, I understand that, this might also just kind of be, a result of, the author attempting to theme this in a very specific way. But, there's kind of just a sense of, under the bus use of these kinds of things. And it's also interesting that, since this book has actually been rewritten multiple times, that, they do give you the alternatives right there. It's not Gypsy Sold, it's Verati Halfling, it's not Chorophagy, it's Roachfolk, and so it's funny now. This is on purpose, That's not even on the nose. That's the entire nose. Yeah. So, I might continue to read this just for the sake of, setting and, any kind of potential staging that you might use for a DM. But, I personally am not a fan of the custom races. All right, let's have that on record. Brainy the RPG Cat, not a fan of the races in this book. The Chorophages in all ways resemble a humanoid cockroach. They stand erect on two thick insectile lower legs with two more sets of limbs extending from their torso, a pair of long insect-like arms extending from their flanks midway through. Well, I mean, okay, it's an upright roach, pretty much. And so, when I make animal people, and I've already evidenced this because when I was writing the RPG, I discussed the possibility of using absolutely any animal in the animal person block. And so underneath that, I'm going to have to create a specified stat block that will allow you to portray any animal to have traits that are specific to the animal who you have decided to create as a character. But, So the way that the racial theming around here is really just more literally the sense that this is a place that is in fact so medieval, so dark age, so grim, so gritty that they have cockroaches that are 6 feet tall and stand on two legs. Roachfolk keep to themselves. Their society largely opaque to outsiders. Well, yeah, because they behave like roaches. They just hide in corners and don't come out unless it's dark. Roachfolk are tolerated and at best are unwelcome in most establishments within the city. They lack the stigma of true vermin born by the night slugs, but nevertheless are treated a little better. Like a roach that you can reason with, I assume. Outside the city, they're likely to be viewed as a monster and a threat. No law in Castor Age requires the Chorophagy to use the bell staves, although some insist that it's only a matter of time. And the rampant pacifism that the Festering Brethren intend to display certainly helps that situation. Despite the peacefulness, the Chorophagy are willing to defend themselves, and the Festering Brethren, in particular, have proven on many occasions to be capable combatants of further discouraging outright acts of violence against their race. Of all races, the Mongol folk are most sympathetic to the Chorophagy and might even perhaps be relations to the Roach folk. Okay, Roach folk are survivors, have little use for religion. Hardscrabble existence among the Chorophagy makes techniques of day-to-day survival their first priority. Common names are Abe, Ben, Bal, Bob, Cain, Doc, Duke, Gov, Judd, Lord, Mab, Nod, Prince, Queen, Rose, and Two. Color me surprised that they're pacifistic. Well, I guess in a very general sense, And so, we've already also, kind of figured out at this point that the author is really just kind of discussing that primarily this is the way that these races tend to act while they are inside the city. So maybe that's just, it's difficult because, once again, we're getting right into the race problem. It's not that you really should make this judgment on a person based on their race, and it would be better if it were in the background. Let's see. Lantern folk, an offshoot of the species known as the Darrow, who are fey-descended creatures from the dark realms below the earth. The Darrow themselves are evil, and less inclined to evil. Oops, worm people, mole people, whatever anybody thinks to be disgusting at the time. There's a really great example from the Pixar movie Inside Out, whereas in an English country, they put broccoli on the pizza, and it's broccoli on the pizza that's considered to be disgusting. But in Eastern countries, they change it to bell peppers, which actually Westerners actually put on pizza regularly. So, it's really just a matter of perspective. Okay, so let me start over with the Lantern Folk paragraph. The Lantern Folk are an offshoot from the species known as the Darrow, who are fey-descended creatures of the dark realms below the earth. The Darrow themselves are evil and insane by any normal surface dweller standpoint. The Lantern Folks are less inclined to evil than their deeper dwelling cousins, and are also somewhat less insane. At home in the underneath, we're avoiding the Underdark copyright again. The Lantern Folk have lived long enough in the shadow of the great city-state above to have taken on some of its characteristics, much like the blighted humans. The Lantern Folk have skin ranging from pale blue to stark white, and wild bushy hair ranging from stark white to pale blue. This is probably a good example of an ASMR-like race, but an ASMR-like race that is attuned to this very specific setting. They wear mustaches and sideburns regularly, though beards are fairly uncommon. Bulging pupilless eyes like their cousins, the Darrow, and only 4 fingers on each hand. It's also very easy to imagine them as like humans that also have like salamander traits, like complete and total darkness, pale and pupil-free eyes, and frequently dwell in the darkness and in areas where light never encroaches. So yeah, they might be similar to deep gnomes. Society Lantern Folk dwell among the dwarves of the underneath and elect Dell chiefs to govern their neighborhoods for an orderly and peaceful fashion. There's also a very good chance that this was written before they had actually developed the concept of Dwergar. And so in an official 5e module, this would be a Dwergar. They typically work as miners, craftsmen, traders, tunnel maintenance workers, or gatherers of resources available only in the underneath or lower subterranean areas. When encountered on the surface in the night markets or well-shaded establishment, they sell the rare gems or negotiate contracts with surface firms for the kinds of specialized work that they can provide. The Darrow's racial propensity for sadistic experiments and poisoning only rarely emerges among Lantern Folk individuals. Religion, for the most part, they have embraced the religion of the dwarves of the underneath, who sponsored them and hold Bergrim, Earthblood, or Krugus in higher regard. So yeah, they worship the Underdark dwarf god. Yes, good point. The Dwergar and the gnome are evil-leaning generally, but the deep gnomes are good. And so like with the Dwergar, they're describing a race of gnome that perpetually lives underground. All folk interested in plumbing the maze of tunnels that exit beneath the underneath, few are more suited to this lifestyle than the Lantern Folk. Their natural ability to navigate these low passages and survive in great darkness makes them most suitable. They also do well above ground to many of the cellars of the city or even on its winding streets at night. Be sure to check with your DM if you can play this. Alignment, size, speed, city knowledge, advantage on intelligence history checks. Darrow magic, light and thaumaturgy. When you reach 3rd level, you can use color spray once per day. When you reach 5th level, you can cast darkness once per day. You also do not need material components for these spells, but are unable to cast these spells while in direct sunlight. You can cast these spells again with this trait after you've finished a long rest. Charisma is your spellcasting ability for these spells. Dark vision, you're accustomed to dark and very dim conditions from having spent your life mostly underground. Under dim light conditions, you can see up to 60 feet as if this area were brightly lit. You see shades of gray instead of colored darkness conditions. Sunlight sensitivity, you have disadvantage on attacks and wisdom perception checks. You know your own. Shadow stealth. A hide action is a bonus action while in dim light or darkness. Okay. The Night Slug. None is as naturally capable of the fine art of breaking and entering as the Night Slug. Fortunately for sorcery, few are also as cowardly. Night Slugs maintain their existence simply by avoiding notice, sometimes called tunnel people by the new folks of Casterage that run across them in the endless sewer channels beneath the city. These elusive creatures often reside in small crawl spaces or even hollows between the other outer masonry. So, I am not really seeing the difference between this and the Roachkin so far. Let's see. They can maneuver their bodies through seemingly impossible spaces. Those among their number who are not likely enough to acquire such grand accommodations typically live in places that allow them to avoid notice, the city dump, a gable, hanging over an alleyway, and so forth. Perhaps it's really just the sense that they are the more... the Roachkin, except that they are more inclined to potentially being a rogue. That's what I'm going with so far. Night slugs have a humanoid structure with blush-gray skin, bearing randomly arranged tufts of muddy brown hair. Their skins are thin and elongated, hanging limply at their sides. They seem to possess little, if any, muscle tone in general. Their ligaments and tendons are exceptionally elastic, allowing a night slug to elongate its arms and legs. In the process, pulling which muscle it has closer to its frame. In addition, night slugs have a collapsible skeleton. Its bones are primarily of cartilage, allowing the creature to squeeze into incredibly small areas. Night slugs are scavengers living on the fringes of society of others. They usually prefer densely populated or urban areas for their increased number of... I completely lost my place. Urban areas of the increased number of hiding places and resources from which to scrounge their needs. Most night slugs are lone learners because of limited resources available to them. Mated couples rarely staying together beyond the birth of a brood of wimps, as their youngs are called, and mothers generally abandoning their young as soon as they reach maturity after 3 years. While most humanoids resemble night slugs and find their presence loathsome, few actually fear the creatures more than once. Urban Good Life has walked into a room to find a night slug crouched in the corner, chewing on a lace table runner and staining the rug with its noxious skin secretions. While a typical reaction certainly includes a scream, rather than a flight, it just often concludes with her grabbing a broom and chasing the creature until it manages to squeeze back through a crack in the baseboards to the safety of their inner walls. Okay, this is an intelligent being. So, you're saying that, of the races that you want to create and you want people to potentially portray, some of them are quite literally in a perpetual Tom and Jerry situation with their townsfolk. In some cities plagued by these creatures, there's an entire industry for exterminators hired to enter homes and buildings, oh my god, to clear out night slug infestation. The only race that can truly be said to hold empathy for the night slugs are the wretched Mongol folk on the rare occasions when the two peoples cross paths. Okay, nobody has, kind of tried to have a conversation here. In general, night slugs are not religious and devote little time or energy to contemplation. As such, there's no religion can be said typical of night slugs, and most follow no religion at all. Yeah, you're just a humble worm folk, This is devolving into tales of worm paranoia. Unlike their skull cousins who possess a more violent bent, night slugs are inherently cowardly and rarely a threat to even those who would otherwise find themselves at their mercy. Be sure to check with your dungeon master if you want to play a night slug character, because in all likelihood this character might be the antithesis of a character that you might actually run in a tabletop RPGs. As loner and outcast, most night slugs don't even bother with names. Their lack of interaction with most others prevents any sort of need for one. Borrowed from another language or a monosyllabic name that sounds pleasing to a particular night slug's ear, including blue, fancy, glug, plop, spoon, and tater. Let's see. Seldom live more than 30 years. Dexterity increases by 4, intelligence is reduced by 2, and charisma is reduced by 4. Wow. That's probably, the largest intelligence and charisma penalty that I've ever seen on a single stat list. 10 towards chaos or neutrality. Night slugs are small creatures. They're flexible and capable of squeezing themselves in their surroundings and are capable of making stealth checks with advantage. You are a monstrosity. Your base walking speed is 20 feet. So, I've never... So, this is a first one for me, but I'm pretty sure that there have been other... I'm sure that there have been other books where monstrosity races are actually playable. So, that's dealer's choice, how much you actually want to kind of work with that as a GM. Dark vision, slide crawler, crawl speed of 20 feet, and crawling doesn't slow it down even in difficult terrain. Slime coat. The skin of a night slug secretes a thin fluid resembling a slimy perspiration that has a musty odor and leaves a stain on most fabrics. The coating protects the night slug against the grappling. Other creatures have disadvantage when trying to grapple a night slug, and a night slug has advantage on its attempts to escape from grappling. It also makes night slugs very easy to track. Survival checks also follow a night slug's trail across any type of terrain are made with advantage. Night slugs can compress, and they can speak, read, and write in common. Interesting. I thought the music had stopped. It's just playing a really quiet track for some reason. Alright. Okay, so... The swine. Okay. Pleasure. Pleasure and pleasure, the 3 P's of swine philosophy. A swine lives to enjoy, eat the finest food, to romance the most beautiful people, to plunder the greatest treasure. The swine is a voyeur, a pleasure seeker, a Lothario. They do anything and everywhere to ensure that they get the most out of life. This is clearly, the racial version of your favorite political cartoon caricature. In essence of a humanoid pig, the swine is usually fat, sallow-eyed, and hungover from excess, dressed as best as he can buy. A swine gets what he can out of life as often as plentifully as possible. Roughly human in size and shape, and with all the foibles and interests that accompanies, the swine are often mistaken for fat humans from a distance until their snouts and their piggy eyes come closer into view. Swine tend to stick together and refer to each other as brother or sister hog. Some swine pass for humans, so subtle are their porcine features. Others resemble humanoid pigs, with hoggish features, clumsy hands, and squealing laughter. They all tend to be fat, a result of enjoying as much fine food as they possibly can, and prone to being clumsy. The porcine ancestry runs deep and occasionally shows itself in their eating habits. So a little bit of history. The original versions of orcs from the TSR version of the Dungeons & Dragons books frequently did portray them as people who literally look like pigs, and this was the antithesis of any kind of folklore where they had written about orcs previously. And, a lot of just kind of the nomenclature versus the appearance of several of these ancient creatures are different because these are very old stories that they're based on. They're based on, word of mouth. They're based on the verbal storytelling tradition. It's very likely that when I write my own book, for example, I might replace the concept of tieflings with imps, because imps comes from public domain, while tiefling still might be a Dungeons & Dragons copyright. But, So this is once again going within the theming and just working within the satire of its own setting. They're using pig people to literally portray the aristocratic upper class individuals in any society that live to a particular excess. Okay. Swine stick together. A swine almost always helps another swine in trouble, often with the benefit of a considerable lecture on the error of their ways and how the suffering swine in question should follow the path of his benefactor, whether that path may be. Swine live for excess and have developed many guilds of their own to band together to ensure mutual benefit, providing, of course, that benefit is primarily their own. The swine have developed thousands of clubs related to excess and pleasure, the most famous of which are the Hedonists, a group perpetually related to dark rumors of excess, torture, and cruelty over enormously excessive luncheons. And yes, Tiefling is 100% a D&D creation. Okay. Relations. Everyone has its uses, and a swine judges life by the number of associates he has. Their selfish natures tend to make true friendships rare but incredibly close. A swine friend is one for life, but a swine associate cannot be trusted. Swine deeply admire the banking gnomes of the city, and many close associations have and do take place across the city. They consider themselves to be flighty and unpredictable. They consider elves to be flighty and unpredictable, dwarves miserable, and half-orcs repulsive. They have a halfling's appetite and admire the human capacity for vice. They take great offense at being linked to pigs and often refer to other humanoid races as monkeys as a riposte if so insulted. Swine religions are based around acquisition, be it monetary, rare objects, land property, or any other avarice. Profast, the swine god of wine cellars, is one. Hork, goddess of musk, another. Of course, Mammon has the greatest share of worshippers among the race, and has been adopted into the swine pantheon. Adventurers, the restless greed of the swine makes them useful as allies, which, coupled with their brotherliness, makes them useful contacts. Make sure to check with the dungeon master if you want to play. Constitution and charisma increased by 2, and dexterity is reduced by 2. Same ages as humans. Alignments, swine can be of any alignment, but most often their gluttony are the motivators pushing them to follow their whims and do whatever they need to get away with. Swine are generally as tall as humans, but almost all... let me see, what was that? Okay, swine are generally as tall as humans, but almost very plump to morbidly obese. Size is medium. Base walking speed of 30 feet. 60 feet of dark vision. Gut feelings. Swine are naturally gifted at judging people or sniffing out a bargain. You have proficiency in insight. Healthy, swine can and often do eat almost anything, and their powerful fortitude makes them highly resistant to toxins and sickness. Keen smell. You have advantage on wisdom perception checks that rely on smell. Stubborn, advantage on saving throws against being charmed or compelled. Our languages, you can read, write, speak common, and one additional modern language of your choice. So, I think we're through with races. I think we have another 20 minutes. We can start on Blight backgrounds. And so, for the, just the significant amount of, theoretical ground that we've covered in the race section alone, is that I'm pretty sure that this one is really just going to be mostly focused on occupations. So we'll just see about that. Okay. As you read through the below backgrounds, you'll notice that several are tailored for specific races. This was intentional and provides additional defining characteristics to those races. That doesn't mean that other races are not allowed to have the backgrounds. If a specific background is good for your character, then work with your GM to customize it for your game. As always, these are optional suggestions intended to immerse you and your character into the Blight. For characteristics, ideals, bonds, and fonts, consult the game manual. Okay. Alchemist, typically found surrounded by bubbling types of jars, frothing jugs of vile-smelling ichor, and tubes connecting to tubes connecting to tubes. You were once admired throughout the city for your nose for the task and cutting skills with all manner of toxic substances, but you grew obsessed with perfecting your art, and your reputation quickly became that of dangerous and unpredictable, if not mad. You now apply your trade out of the eye of the public, and only to customers that are looking for less traditional means of enchantment. as though nobody in this game is ever going to need a health potion. So, of course, Alchemist, we know it as a subclass of Artificer. And, so once again, this was probably written slightly before that concept was added to 5e. Boatfolk. The river barges where you're born, grew up, and have lived all your life for all you know. You and your people are fiercely insular and come from tight-knit families. You celebrate your own holidays and have your own festivals, manners, and cant. Tradition is very important to you and yours, and no one, not even the queen, will make you all change. You've seen the looks outsiders give you when you speak in river cant, and you are sure their suspicious glares hide their disdain for you and your people. So now we have river cant. It's not a cant that is tied to a specific race, like we deal with the variety halflings, but it's actually something that is tied to a background. You are a sailor, you know how to talk like a sailor. Okay, so oral tradition, you're responsible for the lore and history of your clan. You're chosen by your grand to carry the traditions and ways of your people. At gatherings, children and adults alike seek you out to hear the stories, deeds, and folklore of the Boatfolk. One day, you too will pick someone to carry on the tradition. Okay. Crooked. You have been touched by between, and are not like others. You cannot stand to look in the mirror for fear of seeing things from your worst nightmares reaching out to pull you down into the dark and slowly devour you as you unleash a scream that no one hears. Your peculiarity and random outbursts draw looks and whispers that make you uncomfortable and misanthropic. You have a strange presence that often warns you out of danger. Your gift has you always looking over your shoulder, waiting for the glimpses of events you see to happen. You're told very few about your clairvoyance, fearing that they will try to exploit you for your own gain. And so, that's extreme paranoia written as a background. Capitaler, the towering fist of the city, the capital, casts its intimidating shadow across the numerous districts, ghettos, and the squalid sewers of Castor Shage. Born in the heart of this immense city in a building, your speech, dress, and demeanor reflect your privileged birth compared to most born in the Blight, and you feel an air of superiority as you pass amongst the decrepit, stinking, filthy rabble that is the bulk of the lower cities. The intrigue, the betrayal and deceit, the truth and lies, the daily drama enacted in the name of politics is the driving force in your life. You hail from the capital, where your parents mingled with minor gentry, scholars, guards, or any number of civil servants and people of some importance. Because of this, you can come and go among the countless clerks, servants, butlers, and other necessary personnel within the labyrinth halls that lie beyond the great door. You know the inner workings of the extensive bureaucracy within the capital and gain access to records that normally would never be privy to. You gain audience with minor functionaries with needed. It's just a minor conversion of probably being a noble or an elitist, because we're working with a slightly more advanced and primitive society in this game. Okay, so cultists, the quote-unquote gods of Castorhage, are not divine, but rather legends of myths that have risen to godlike prominence and developed cult-like followings. These gods, Beltane, the crooked Promethean, the aspect of the Green Man, and many others, with immense authority, influence, and fear over the people of the Blight, and that influence extends to you. You follow one of these gods with slavish devotion, enacting their will and spread their influence across the Blight. Work with your game master to determine which god fits your character in the campaign. You Bolt Bowl. You lead a normal life, moving along the populace as any other resident. Your affiliation with one of the cults is secret, but you have taken precautions just in case one has ever been compromised. You have established a safe house where a few close associates can retreat to lay low for a time, and then work with your GM to establish a location. Okay. The Charmwell. Your features and mannerisms reflect your elven parentage and foreshadow any human blood that runs through your veins. The Fey blood flows strong within you. You might even have the stuff of the old ones, or possibly the dark Fey. So, when we read this passage of the City Fey earlier, they did suggest that, you just kind of have a somewhat innate ability in order to enact charm and influence within other species. So they also have it as a background with the possibility of putting it on a character that that might potentially be a character other than an elf. At least that's what I'm operating with. That's the belief that I'm operating under. Okay. Okay, so feature bedliner. You have a steady gig at a local tavern or theater. You show whether comedy, drama, tragedy, or simply relative shenanigans. The bodiest caliber is always sold out in days of advance. You might even have a paramour that's rather famous within the city. Okay. The Forsaken. You've come to the city to discover and learn, hoping that your lifetime of memories and experience will reveal some greater meaning, but memories are fickle, and you may have what may have been in your reality now seems like a dream. Your bitterness that your long life is coming slowly to an end is apparent, and you have developed a grim reputation among the locals. You are one of those who have come to Casterhage in the twilight of your years, searching for meaning and understanding of what your life has truly meant. And so, feature is a lifetime of learning. You've acquired a lifetime of knowledge and training in life, and the Blight evokes past experiences with the new. You can call upon a lifetime of learning and research and consider a source of knowledge and lore for your peers. You're considered an expert in an obscure subject. A hooligan, one of the invisibles, the low folk, the lowest of the low. You're born and raised in a cesspit that passes for slums within the Blight. You know how dangerous the streets are, but are able to navigate them with ease. These are your streets, your people, and you have a reputation among the underclass of the Casterhage as someone to not be trifled with. Murder, blackmail, illegal insectum, extortion, racketeering, these are but a few things that you and your crew traffic in. When something happens, you know about it thanks to your network of informants. Feature, friends in low places, you have contacts in all part of the underworld. Some owe you favors of money, some others simply fear you, others respect you, but they all supply information that you can use to get ahead in this between dog eat, between dog world. So, yeah. They are putting emphasis on between. That's just part of the book's theming. The Lime Blessed. Sister Lime, she slithers, or perhaps more rightly oozes through the city, her veins reaching upstream to taint and choke. None can escape her. She particularly affects humans. You spent many generations on the back of her womb, and it is seeped into your pores. You wear this patina, this information, and she has a strong hold on you. You've never been able to venture far from her banks for long, always returning to her bosom, seeing her caress, and drinking deeply from her waters. Feature, clear sight. Your eyes have suddenly evolved to see better through water distortions and obstructions. You can see twice as far as others through fog, mist, and murky water. So, this might be the custom background for the fish people that we discussed earlier, and well, once again, it exists, so this kind of concept can be put onto another character. But once again, if this were just a background, is that your portrayal within this RPG is merely the vessel of someone who is an all-consuming, grim, slug-like god or a goddess, and you are their eyes and ears. That seems to be a bit more intriguing to me. Well, see, it doesn't. How would it work for anything else? But that's there is the rub, is that if you could get it to work for somebody else, then you would walk away with it, and you would have an incredibly unique character, as opposed to just tying it to this other race of characters that we know are already completely and totally distrusted by the entirety of the society. It makes the background much more palatable to the people who might be playing this RPG than it would if you decided to play as a race. Let's see. Revolutionary. Vile politicians, twisted royalty, greedy thugs, a disease and decay that rules Casterhage must be excised completely, so that those that suffer under the yoke of tyranny and oppression can be free. You've seen the malignancy firsthand, and after all, you are born to it as a child of the aristocracy. You grew to despise your station and show those that to perpetuate the rot, but now you fight. Feature inside man. Because you are born to the aristocracy, you are privy to the plots and schemes of the ruling class. You use this to your advantage and gather influence that help to shadow the freedom and another ground revolutionary movement strike at the heart of the corruption and expose them for what they are. Alright. Salt of the earth. Coming from the respective family in the city, you can trace your local ancestry back from other generations to Dwarven Kingdom, and to have first carved the underneath. You're extremely proud of your heritage, and will never let your clan be besmirched. You are well known within your home territory, and have a reputation as forthright, stern, and wise. Okay, family feud. You can organize an organization, a guild, a club, or a noted individual from the Blight with whom they have a long-standing grudge. You have a network of informants that report on activities of your hated foe. Additionally, you take any opportunity available to act on his family grudge. Okay, so we have one more page of backgrounds. I think I just want to complete this section, and then from here, we're going to go into quirks and disadvantages. So we'll start to explain that at the beginning of next stream, because that's a trait that is specific to this game, and so it just kind of works better in order to, just bridge things based on, what is unique in this game's themes. Okay, so a savage, I think it is. Yeah, a savage. Your parents came to the city to seek their fortune. Half-orcs themselves. They found life hard, and they joined a growing number of half-orcs who live in dark, rusty ghettos and hovels grouped together for fear of attack. They're tough, independent, smart, and have learned to survive alone in the city. You must do what you must the only way you know, by any means necessary. Feature exit strategy. People look upon you with disdain and suspicion. You must be wary when you're out of your home territory. The first thing you do when you enter a building is identify the different means of egress. You can handle your own, but you're a survivor, and sometimes that means making a quick getaway. A sprawl mason. Some doors have a particularly strong background in all things connected to building. You have an extremely keen eye for quality, craftsmanship, and can identify who the craftsman was. Furthermore, you're extremely well respected craftsmen in your district and are often sought after for your skill and innovation. Feature professional reputation. You've earned the respect and admiration of others both in and out of your trade. You're the first person that others in your craft come for advice and for permission to take commissions within your district. You have prospective apprentices begging for your tutelage. Okay. Toiler. Myriad dwarf families come to the Castle Age seeking work and a reputation for their spirit of toil, gain many employment, a trade expert and successful merchant. You're always on the lookout for new ventures and investment opportunities. Jade figurines from an ancient and forgotten civilization. Not a problem, you can find it, which is why you're sought after by the most discerning clientele. Feature trade network. You have a well-established network of merchants and traders that come to you when they arrive in Castle Age, so you can have that pick of any of their goods. You can find hard-to-locate goods, contraband, and other sundries through legal and illegal means. Thanatologist. Death is always present in Castle Age. The study of death, how bodies of decay, how changes go through the postmodern period has always been fascinating to you. You spend all of your spare time studying death and its processes. You're not concerned with the meaning of life and death, just the physiological and forensic aspects of death and how the knowledge can benefit from those still living. Feature body farm. You have established a body farm of sorts within the districts of Castle Age. You have been able to place bodies in various stages of decay in areas where they will not be disturbed. These locations are secluded enough that you can visit them and record their observations and findings without fear of interruption. You also have established contracts with several body snatchers who are always willing to take your coin for the freshest specimens. So, being a person who studies and also frequently squirrels away dead bodies is something that is eventually going to be beneficial to this game. Okay. Traveler, you're a brilliant performer that can dazzle, amaze, and entertain crowds. Not only are you blessed with talent and stage presence, but you have dashing good looks and are keenly aware of the effect that you have on others. You have a silver tongue to match your charm and often can talk your way out of or into any situation. Persuasion, so source is grift. You can run the short or the long con. You can spark the best marks and have associates you can call on a moment's notice to run a scam. These are those that are still talking about your last con as if it were legendary. And finally, the vigilante. Life in the Blight is brutal, injustice, murder, slavery, and worse plague the streets, subjecting the already hopeless residents to suffering unknown in the majority of other cities. You cannot stand to see this continue. You see the inequity, the abuse, and the rotten corruption at the heart of the Blight, its cancers, and that must be excised. If the law won't protect them, then you will. Featured judge, jury, and executioner. It gives you the right to cast judgment and sentence on those who praise the weak. The fact that the law will not protect them gives you the right. You feel no remorse when you hunt down, cast judgment, and carry on the sentence to these vermin. You are the law. And so that is the entirety of the race choices and the background choices that exist within the Blight manual. And so I think I've kind of walked away with just a little bit of a mixed opinion of this. Is that the best way to describe it would be is that I don't feel as though I would object to this game being run. Only that I would more than likely make some pretty extreme changes to some of the nomenclature. I would take many of the things that are already put in race, and I would move it into background sections. I would also pretty severely reconsider, how some of the races are viewed by the public, because the inability in order for a individual of any race to do tabletop roleplay is greatly inhibited by the fact that they might be ostracized by the society. And so if there are elements in that, then that just kind of makes those characters, become ignored or avoided by the people who might be creating a character. So I would definitely make some changes there. But other than that, I'm still intrigued by the theme. We still have yet to scratch the surface about what the citywide roleplay is actually involved in, and there's lots of things that we can still uncover when it comes to this. We're probably going to be coming back to this book again next week. So thank you everybody once again for tuning in to Brainy the RPG Cat. So as usual, we are supported by the Well of the Worlds Kickstarter, published by Rem Alternatives Productions, written by Michael Serbrook, and published by Mobius Worlds. Be sure to be signed up for the mailing list so that you can be informed of the launch of the Kickstarter, which is going to be this April the 4th. So, thank you everybody once again for tuning in. I believe that I am going to be back tomorrow, and I believe that we are going to be going back to our next section of Pokemon Scarlet. We only have the 3 final quests in every category in order to complete. So we're probably only going to be doing maybe about 2 or 3 more streams of that, and then we'll be completed. We're following that up with a playthrough of Pizza Tower. In Pizza Tower, the only thing that we have left to do is battle the final boss. So that is going to be, that's probably going to be the last stream for that game. So I'm very happy. We actually do have the opportunity to knock some video games out of the lineup, and that's probably a first for the entirety of the time that I've been streaming as Brainy the RPG Cat. So hooray for me. I'm actually decided to finish something. Alright, so thank you everybody for tuning in. I think I would like to do a raid. Let me see, who would I like to raid now? I'm also very excited for this coming Saturday. This coming Saturday, I'm going to be streaming with a special guest, Shy Bunny Servant, who, as you know, is one of the people who plays with me in One Shots from the Meowing Portal. We're going to be introducing you through a new Writing the RPG to the realm of the Baron's Wasteland, which is an original role-playing environment that we have been working on together for some time now. This Saturday is going to be the first time that we premiere it to you wonderful people. So you're going to have to catch a bot then. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. But it's really just, this is the time that I'm able to collect everybody. At any rate, thank you everybody once again for tuning in. So, who am I going to raid once again? So, they might be interesting. Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna go over to we're gonna go over to Mary Mermaid right now. She's in the middle of her long play of Stray. I think she's getting close to the end of that. But anyways, thank you everybody for tuning in. I will see you on Tuesday, and have a good night, everybody. And thank you very much for watching.